Now that the kinda cool parody-ass title sequence is out of the way, I can get along to the meat of the matter, which in this case is pretty simple, not so fancy down-to-earth philosophical goal within the realm of some sort of meta-cinema, you know? It's gonna be a piece of cake. I like shooting fish. I got this idea I've been kinda mulling over about the possibility of an unidentified movie genre, as far as I know. I've been calling them Easterns on account of they sometimes take place in the Middle East, or have some sort of connection to that part of the world. It's a fun play in the American term Westerns. But really though, there's interesting similarities between Westerns of the past and contemporary Easterns as I call them. Like sand, use of the lone wolf archetype, rugged and gritty atmosphere, characters having a weird relationship with justice. Now don't go doing something stupid like getting the genre confused with red westerns, or Easterns, or Easter films. I don't even see how you could do that without trying to mess things up. So, if you're still with me, you might be asking, why are you taking movies that already have genres and inventing a new genre? Aren't you like those jerks that take electronic music and subdivide it until you got a Zeno's Paradox thing going on? But I guess to understand my reasoning, you'd have to understand the value of grouping things together, which is kinda how human logic works, I guess. But my point is, in creating a genre, I can study Easterns and how they relate to one another. I'll admit I'm starting from the idea that film is already capable of philosophy, and then taking what this guy Mulhall said about film series with different directors being capable of engaging in a sort of dialogue with each other. So, like, James Cameron is discussing an awareness of what makes the original storyline click with Ridley Scott in his film's Aliens, sequel to Alien. I mean, it's a thought-out movie in mainstream and a series, so it's pretty perfect for what Mulhall's getting at. And then you have David Fincher telling Cameron that everything he did isn't the case, and that Ripley can't have a husband or love anyone really. So the Alien series has multiple films with different directors all like talking to each other. And so Mulhall's getting at this idea that that's the way they do philosophy with film. And I'm trying to do the same thing with the genre, so quit asking. Yeah, the reason this matters is because I want to do what he does with the genre. And not just any genre, but to make sure I have a whole bunch of work to sift through. I've chosen a pretty specific and subtle genre that's only been kind of glanced at in terms of discussion on post 9/11 cinema. Cool, huh? So by applying what I know from Mulhall to this genre, treat it like a series, modifying his ideas a little to allow a lack of direct contemplation between other films, but rather contemplation of overall thematic issues that these films might share. I begin to see how the themes of these films, which are similar between them because they are a genre, constitute a larger philosophical inquiry of that genre, as if the directors were discussing similar issues as some big get-together, like in my aunt's house. As for these films which prove what I'm talking about, I got the Bourne series, Traitor, Deja Vu, Vantage Point, The Kingdom, Hurt Locker, Syriana, Green Zone, Safe House. So you get the idea. Of course, to help further define my terms, it's good to be clear that I fully understand these movies belong to other genres, kinda like you can say Star Wars is both sci-fi and fantasy, and action, and romance. If you want, I guess you could say this is a spy action thriller political kind of genre, but I prefer my term Easterns anyway. Now, I will admit before continuing on, Easterns are problematic in that they don't feature too much of recurring actors or directors. I mean, the Bourne series is pretty much ideal in most categories of the genre I've laid out, so ideally it could be seen as a sort of pinnacle in the golden age for this genre, like the good and the bad and the ugly with this genre, or like Superman in comic books, or Biggie Smalls and whatever he took part in. But my point is, despite being so ideal, Matt Damon, unlike Eastwood, Smalls, and Mann, doesn't take the genre with him, even if he did act in Green Zone and Syriana. And so that's problematic because the epitomizing series doesn't contain the epitomizing star. So we have to watch him do other stuff, like play rugby, wear a hat, or buy a zoo. I mean, here he's fat. What's up? Anyway, the reason I bring this up is to point out that the nature of the genre is one that doesn't identify itself because it's incredibly contemporary. It would be like if we made westerns in the old Wild West. No one would call them westerns. They'd just be realism movies, or whatever. So I mean, it's still a genre, it's just hard to see. So now I know what makes this genre a genre. which is the same as any other, really. Themes, archetypes, least importantly, aesthetics. Looks-wise, these films all do seem to feature a similar setting, either deserts or cold, unfeeling buildings with multiple corridors. Of course, the Middle East is often a prominent place to shoot these kinds of things. Of course, I'm talking about Afghan starves and stubble-wearing men. I get into the problem of really just describing a popular contemporary fashion, so I want to leave that out. Oh, and another thing. All of these films have this weird setting I like to call the control room, which is where some CIA head, who's in a way the main bad guy, sees something on the screen and says, "Where is he? We need that location 5 minutes ago." And then someone else says, "We've lost him, sir." And everything goes nuts. The control room can kind of take on its own character and persona, becoming evil itself in a sense. It's kind of like Mother from Metroid, or Hal from a space something. I mean, you get the idea. These rooms are constantly tracking these guys down, and have larger roles in the film than most people. But some others would be the lone wolf. He doesn't have a family, it seems, usually, and while he may make friends, and sometimes, though this is usually an exception to the ideal, ends up with some girl that he met. I mean, you can see Friends in like Deja Vu, when Denzel hooks up with that weird guy with the beard. Or Jason Bourne has like Nicky Parsons, or, Tom Hanks. But for the most part, these guys are lone wolves in every sense of the word, and they usually are kind of conspiracy theorists, like trying to figure out what's happening in their own chaotic, typically government-observed world. So they'll be running around trying to solve puzzles that'll take scriptwriters hours to make up, but they do it in a matter of seconds, because they're cool, and lone wolves, I guess. But these conspiracy theorists kind of represent us in our own kind of chaotic post-9/11 confusion, trying to figure out truth from, a world controlled by governmental lies or whatever. I mean, we can see how we can relate to the characters this way, which is pretty much the only way you can explain becoming attached to a man too fast to see that never smiles and always wears black and gray. Another common archetype is gonna have to be the suit. Some CIA head that is higher ups and isn't really a character so much as a face or something greater that's opposing our friend in the movie, the protagonist. He's easy to spot because he's not running, wears a tie, and kind of looks like my uncle. At some point you're gonna hear him yell at someone for not finding someone else, or maybe calling someone out on some other mistake, looking at a stack of papers. Usually wears glasses. The point of this guy is not so much an archetype, really, as just a type or a stock character representing a larger force of evil. And when you think about this, it's just that he's really has no bearing on the situation, but just appears to be in charge of something larger than himself anyway. The other archetype is going to be the terrorist. Now, I know terrorism has been in films since pretty much forever, even Muslim ones, but this time it's a little different. They've become more explored by the directors in all of the genres. They're not even really bad guys anymore, just so much as a kind of plot contortion, I guess. They come in a whole bunch of varieties today too, not just stereotypical terrorists. They might be assassins or just really hardcore patriots, or they could be Arabs, or they might not even be there, but the presence is still going to be felt. I mean, think about it. The Hurt Locker doesn't really give you any specific terrorist to kind of hate on. The bomb is the real bad guy, when you think about it that way. But then again, that kind of reminds me of real life, where I've never seen a terrorist. And yes, since grade 5, I've played with the kind of what if. The thought of a plane crashing into my hometown. So, that's kind of why these archetypes interact in an interesting way with these directors from all over the place, leading them into discussions about politics, government, identity, and really overarchingly the wake of 9/11. Now, a lot of people give Hollywood flack for not portraying 9/11 enough, or at least not engaging in the idea thematically, which is funny to me because it seems when you engage in thinking about it and portraying it directly, like movies United 9/3 or World Trade Center, you end up missing the point entirely. Neither of these films deal with the impact of the event, and in a way don't make any sense of it at all. Now, maybe I'm taking a little far. I mean, they're both fine movies, especially United 9/3, But in a sort of way, both suffer from a sort of vicarious thrill that it's attempting to give you. You know, of being there, then a way we never can be. There's some places even the camera can't go. I mean, honestly, if you made a film about 9/11, no one would ever really go to see it. I mean, a film really about 9/11, you know, about being there. You would always have to make it around 9/11 to be both honest and getting important points. The fact that 9/11 isn't in these films allows them to engage in dialogue over what's happened. We get a sense of the Bourne series telling we can never have complete safety. You know, like his constant running is like manning turrets on the trade centers. It's never enough. Whereas Deja Vu explores some deeper facets of terrorism, like motives and humanity. Traitor goes even further, bringing us to a man becoming a terrorist to fight terrorism while having to fight the country he's attempting to work for. Like a body with so many antibodies it starts killing itself. That don't make no sense. Another really good one is Vantage Point, which goes and has us actively engaged as a conspiracy theorist. You know, figuring out which information belongs where in hopes of patching up the events of a terrorist attack, which really allows us to reflect on how we may have handled the 9/11 attacks personally, patching up different information delivered to us by news stations and whatnot. So in conclusion, 9/11's not being there discusses post-9/11 feelings more than certain biopics on the issue. I mean, that said, such films may be, and are in certain cases still, quality cinema, but they don't fit this genre and don't contain these themes. When it comes to government and the aftermath, we often see an exploration into the loss of trust we have kindled in our government. Green Zone gets at this in a sort of historical narrative fashion, whereas the Bourne series does it in a fictional narrative, and so on. Most of these films are using settings like the control room and characters like the backstabbing white guys in suits to explore our feelings of insecurity in a nation attempting to become secure. Now, the films that feature this the least, namely The Kingdom and Hurt Locker, are the ones that dwell more in other established genres, you know, like the war genre, than other films. But that doesn't leave those closer to the ideal Eastern not playing with the idea. They bathe in it when you think about it. The whole time you're wondering who the bad guy is and what the conspiracy is, and yet you know it's the white guy in the suit. It's oddly never the guy with the gun, or the guy with some sort of bomb. We end up playing a game of who's the terrorist and trust the scarier people, you know, over Brendan Gleeson. What happens is we often end up questioning how far the government should go in these sort of films, you know, and they typically go too far in most, and we find ourselves thinking about the ethical nature, you know, of their actions. Of course, nobody asks me about ethics. Like the protagonists, we start thinking about what we do for our own individual safety, and, you know, closure, and how even though, like Krav Maga, or running real fast, or even being Denzel Washington, it's never going to be enough. It seems applying Mulhall's technique, you know, to an entire genre, though the subtler and more tightly knit the genre, the more obvious it becomes, allows us to see the interconnectedness of thematic and philosophical issues addressed by most of these films in some fashion or another. You know, and so with 9/11 becoming a more distant memory, it seems films are starting to follow suit. So maybe it's a dying genre. It's not going to sell so well to a public that stopped thinking about these things a while ago. I mean, look at Safe House. It got pretty less than preferable reviews. It's basically the Bourne Ultimatum, but lower. But if there's anything I've learned from hip hop, it's that they'll keep beating the horse long after it's dead. And so we might expect to see these high-paced thriller pieces for a while. And every now and then a more reflective and unique one might appear, you know, one that might be aware of its conditions or whatever. But it's most likely the case that this genre is starting to finally fade, which is really kind of a shame when you think about it, because if it had recognized itself more, it might have been able to comment on its own condition. So that's my film. I hope you enjoyed exploring the depths of film philosophy with me. I don't know.